Bon matin, chers collègues.
Good morning, colleagues.
Environment and Sustainable Development. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format and is in public. For those in person, please follow the health and safety guidelines on the cards found on the table to prevent audio or feedback incidents. Aujourd'hui, le comité examine.
Today, the committee examining the supplementary estimates 2025 to 2026 and the mandate of the Department of the Environment and Climate Change.
Minister of Environment and Climate Change, who is here to discuss both studies. The minister is accompanied by the following witnesses. Molly Johnson, Deputy Minister, welcome. Madame Linda Drainville, sous-ministre adjointe et dirigeante principale.
Assistant Deputy Minister and responsible for finances, Departmental and Finance Branch, welcome.
Branch. Alison McDermott, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy and International Affairs Branch. From Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, Terence Hubbard, President, Eric Landry, Vice President Operations, and Patricia Brady, Vice President Strategic Policy and Programs. So, Minister, I have a yellow sign that indicates that you have 1 more minute to speak, and then I turn it over and I ask you to please end your sentence, and that's it. So, Minister, you have up to 5 minutes for opening statement, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Bonjour à tous et à toutes, and thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
I'd like to begin by recognizing that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. I'm happy to be here to discuss my mandate and the 2025-2026 Supplementary Estimates B under my portfolio, which includes Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, and the Canada Water Agency. With me today, as you noted, Mr. Chair, is Molly Johnson, Deputy Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and Terence Hubbard, President of the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. This is a defining moment for Canada. The decisions we make today will shape our country for generations to come. Around the world, economies are undergoing a historic transition towards low-carbon energy and technology. This is reshaping trade, investment, and jobs at a pace not seen since the Industrial Revolution. It's changing the way we drive, the way we heat and cool our homes, the way we work, build, and power our country. This transition represents a real opportunity for Canada to be a leader in the economy of the future. That's why in Budget 2025, we released the Climate Competitiveness Strategy. The strategy is rooted in a simple truth. Addressing climate change is both a moral obligation and an economic imperative. This strategy provides clarity on fiscal, regulatory, and industrial policies to create certainty for businesses to invest, innovate, and compete internationally, all while reducing emissions. It also supports major projects to be built more effectively and efficiently. For example, the Iqaluit Nuki-Sautit hydroelectric project will become Nunavut's first 100% Inuit-owned hydroelectric facility, a milestone in clean energy innovation. This will replace Iqaluit's dependence on 15 million liters of imported diesel each year. This project will advance economic competitiveness while modernizing our infrastructure and lowering emissions.
Climate change is a worldwide challenge without borders. This fall, I co-chaired the G7 and the departmental or ministerial meeting on climate change, climate action in Toronto before leading Canada's delegation to COP30 in Brazil to reassert our commitment to strengthen our climate leadership on the world stage. But this international leadership must be based on concrete measures here at home. At home, the Canadian population is already feeling the impacts of climate change, heat waves, forest fires, droughts, and floods, which damage infrastructure and make local economies more fragile while affecting our health and our natural environments. Nature conservation is one of the most efficient means of reducing these risks. Healthy ecosystems absorb carbon, protect communities, and protect biodiversity. This is why we are continuing our conservation efforts in partnership with the provinces, territories, Indigenous nations, and local communities. This summer, I announced in the Northwest Territories a project, Our Territory for the Future, an important conservation project led by Indigenous peoples. We are also making generational investments in order to strengthen our sovereignty. The 2025 budget sets aside $2.75 billion over 9 years for Environment and Climate Change Canada and Shared Services Canada to acquire a new solution for calculating, which is high performance and essential for providing climate and weather data that are advanced and that Canadians depend on.
Estimates B for my department. These estimates represent a net proposed increase of $2 million. Some of these changes include a request for $4.9 million over 5 years, beginning 25-26, for the extension of the Inuit and Impact and Benefit Agreement. There are also transfers to and from the department, for example, to the Canadian Space Agency and Indigenous Services Canada. Mr. Chair, I'm going to stop here, and I'm happy to take questions from members of the committee.
Thank you, Minister. And the floor is yours for 6 minutes, Mr. Brandon Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, at the UN's International Maritime Organization meeting, your government voted in favor of new net zero carbon tax on shipping. Witnesses told this committee that that tax could cost up to $500 per ton, which will obviously get passed on to Canadians through higher prices of everything that we buy that's shipped here. Do you have any idea whatsoever what this is going to cost Canadians through higher prices?
Thank you for that question, and through you, Mr. Chair. This has been a long-going issue that I hear from questions coming from the Conservatives, which is that the idea that any action on climate change is a net negative, not only for our country, but for the world. We know that the impacts of climate change
I'm just looking for the cost of the tax. If implemented, do we has the department or have done any estimates on what the tax would cost the average item in Canada and therefore Canadians that's passed on to?
So as far as the policies that we have in place, we already, and I have said this before, but actions such as the industrial carbon price do not increase the cost of food for Canadians, do not. And so when we're talking about the actual policies that we have in place in Canada, we do actually, whenever we pass a regulation, provide a regulatory assessment, which is made available. It's transparent and available.
Thank you, Minister. I look forward to seeing that once that tax is implemented. But you talked about the policies that are still in place, and for years, you defended every major climate policy that this government has introduced: the carbon tax on consumers, the $2 billion tree planting program, the emissions cap on oil and gas, the greenwashing regulations, the EV mandate. Then overnight, they have been delayed, watered down, or abandoned entirely. Now, every time one of these policies seems to collide with reality, it falls apart. So what should Canadians conclude from this pattern of you supporting policies and then having to step back from them?
I think what Canadians should take from the work that our government is doing is that we are working forward for policies that are collaborative, meet the needs of Canadians, and fight climate change. We have very much set forward, and it says it in the climate competitiveness strategy, which was in the budget, that we are working to strengthen the industrial carbon price, strengthen methane regulations. We're working on a taxonomy for investment guidelines. We are taking real actions, and we're doing that in collaboration with provinces and territories and making sure that Canadians are at the center of our policies.
Thank you, Minister. Somebody not at the center that used to be at the center, former Environment and Energy Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, publicly said that your new climate competitiveness strategy isn't a climate strategy at all. Do you agree with him? Is he wrong?
We have a climate strategy, which is our emissions reductions plan, and we provide progress reports based on that emissions reductions plan. The climate competitiveness strategy is really the economic piece, putting in place things that were envisioned by the emissions reduction plan, but also going further in some places. It is not the emissions reductions plan. That is a separate document. It is a tool to move forward on climate competitiveness.
Yeah, no, thank you for raising that. The Environment Commissioner, the PBO, the independent experts, pretty much everyone except for yourself has agreed that you will not hit the Paris targets as originally intended. Can you finally admit that your emissions reduction plan is not working and will not achieve the targets that you've laid out?
Well, I am the Environment Minister, first of all, but second of all, when you're talking about the PBO report, specifically did not take into account the climate competitiveness strategy. And if we were going to take into account,
how you just said it wasn't a climate strategy.
No,
why would it need to take that into account?
I didn't say that. I said there was an emissions reductions plan. That the climate competitiveness strategy does not replace the emissions reductions plan.
So everybody else is wrong in saying that we're not going to hit these targets, and you're right, and everyone else is wrong?
What I have said, if you'd let me complete that one, is that we always knew that the targets would be ambitious. We could set low targets. We could have stood by lower targets, and they would be easy to meet. This requires us to stretch. We're determined to keep doing the work to meet them.
Could you tell me the gap in raw numbers between what we expect the 2030 target, what the 2030 target is, and where we are going to end up in 2030? What is that gap right now?
So an emissions reductions plan will be provided by the end of this year, which will provide more details as to exactly where those different numbers stand. But by the way, the commitment to continue doing the work remains. And I think that that's a very important piece. And I would hope that the Conservatives would be willing to support us, because all I hear from Conservatives is that they keep on wanting to remove every single thing we do.
You're going to keep on keeping on, and that's great. Could you tell this committee if there's any specific environmental or climate policy that is simply non-negotiable? It is a red line that would, if crossed, have you resign just like Minister Guilbeault did?
Is there a single environment policy or climate change policy that the Conservatives will support and help us actually move forward on?
I'm here to ask you the questions. This is not about you asking a member of the opposition questions. This is about you answering a question. Is there a line in the sand of a specific environmental or climate policy that if this government, despite your objections, decided to remove, you would have to resign over just like Minister Guilbeault did?
My goal in everything I do is that we keep working to move our country to a low-carbon economy, to net zero, that we keep doing the work that we need to do. It's important for our future generations, and it's important to make sure that we're globally competitive.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Mrs. Miedema, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Minister. Great to have you here. Having done climate work for so long at the local government, I know that it's important to have really ambitious targets and plans, but that you actually need everyone on board to do them. That's all levels of government. That's utilities. That's the business community. That's our nonprofits, and that's the public. And I'm really excited because the next study that this committee is going to look at is one that I proposed on the losses that happen with extreme weather events, insured and uninsured, and what kind of framework we need to protect people going forward. So could you explain the economic consequences of delaying climate action and why consistent policies are important both for our communities and our businesses?
Thank you. And that's a really good question, because one of the things that I think gets missed in a lot of the noise that we hear in the House of Commons especially is that climate change and not taking action on climate change has a cost, a real cost right now. You can see it in the cost of food. One of the largest impacts on increased cost of food is the impact of climate change. It happens when there are droughts, when there are floods. All of these types of things impact the cost of food as we move forward. But beyond that, there's also a competitiveness moment for this country. And Canada has a real edge. We have 9 of the top 100 clean tech companies are based in Canada. So we are second only to the United States in the number of companies on that list. And there's a real moment that if we don't meet it, we lose economic opportunities for our country as well. And that is something that we need to consider. So when we put forward the climate competitiveness strategy, a big part of that was making sure that we were creating certainty and predictability for industry so that they could actually go to where the global economy is going. And the global economy is going to net zero. When I was at the G7, when I was at COP30, that was something that kept on being reinforced. And so if Canada wants to be able to have a space and to lead in that economy, to even be able to access diversified trade markets, making sure that we have sound climate policies here is important to being able to reach those opportunities.
Thank you for that. Can you please touch on how projects that are assigned by or to the Major Projects Office and impact assessments will continue to protect our environment, protect species and habitats, as well as Indigenous rights?
Yeah, thanks. So two pieces, I think, it's just as we break down what happens when we say that we're referring a project to the Major Projects Office, because there are two pieces of the Major Projects Office, and there's the Build Canada Act. Right now, we've referred many projects over to the Major Projects Office, and that is really a chance to have some streamlining where they have extra support in being able to put the pieces together. And through that, the environmental assessment process, the impact assessment agency very much remains a part of that process of assessing those projects going forward. And then there's also the Build Canada Act, which again has as one of its criteria the clean growth and climate objectives for our country. And in our budget, we actually are proposing to reinforce that Build Canada Act by including wording that goes to the application of a climate lens to projects. So that is right now like the two pieces that we have, but the projects that have been referred right now are with the Major Projects Office.
Excellent. Minister, you touched on climate competitiveness strategy. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the strategy could create jobs for Canadians, how it could drive emissions down? You spoke to the investment already, but kind of the major pushes that it's going to provide as a strategy?
Yeah, so one of the things that really strikes me in the conversations that I have with industry, and many different kinds of industry, is that they want to have very clear, predictable rules as to how, what environment they're working within. And so things like having a very clear industrial carbon price, where they know what the credit prices are, they know what they'll be facing into, that helps them to make sure that they're investing towards that. So the main piece, if I was going to say, about the climate competitiveness strategy that I think is so very important is that it creates that predictability and it creates that certainty for industry moving forward. We have said that we are committed to continuing with it. But the other piece, which is when we look at global markets, like the European Union, they have carbon border adjustments. We're seeing that the UK as well. We're seeing that with different markets that we're trying to access as we diversify our trade. And so being able to make sure that we have these climate policies in place helps us to access those markets. It can give Canada an edge, and that's what we really need to do in this moment.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we heard that all through witness testimony on EVs as well. The market certainty is absolutely the most critical piece. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous pour 6 minutes.
Monsieur le Président, bonjour Madame.
Mr. Bonnet, 6 minutes. Good morning, Minister. Thank you, Chair. It's great to have you for the first time at the Environment Committee, and especially with such important headlines. Minister, I'd like to know if you are in favor of a new pipeline for the tar sands, as was announced last week between Alberta and Canada. I'm happy that you asked a question about I don't have the words here, but the memorandum of understanding with Alberta, because this includes several things. The question is, are you in favor of a new 1 billion barrel tar sands pipeline? What I can say is that the process in the agreement, it means that you have to have the agreement of BC. No, I said that what I was saying, if you will allow me to finish, is that it's an agreement. Let me ask my question differently. Are you in favor, yes or no, for a new 1 billion liter pipeline for the tar sands? It's not up to me to decide. It's the provinces, BC, and the Indigenous people to come to an agreement. It's not up to me. You didn't answer the question. Yes, I did answer. I answered, and what I said is, and really to say that that's the difference between us and the Conservatives, because in the House, Conservatives say, yes, we'll do this, and we say that we're going to work with. When we ask questions, what I'm saying is that I'm telling you that we're ready to work with the provinces. You're the Minister of the Environment. You don't have any opinion on a new pipeline of 1 billion barrels. Are you in favor or not? What I am saying is that
dialogue, it's hard for me to keep up on the translation. Just we could.
OK. Même si pas traduit, vous n'êtes pas capable?
even if there's no translation, you're not able to? Okay, well, we'll try to slow it down for you, Mr. Grant. Thank you. My pleasure. So, do you think that a new pipeline for the tar sands will help fight against climate change? What? Yes, Minister? There are not always yes or no questions because in the agreement, there are things with carbon capture. We also have issues on the industrial carbon pricing. And we also have a number of parts of it set up in this agreement, several parties in the agreement. It's not one thing or the other. We have to keep going. And what I have to do as Minister of the Environment is to make sure that here in Canada, we continue to reduce our emissions. And that's what I do. As Minister of the Environment to you, increasing production of oil from the tar sands would allow you to increase or reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase or decrease. There are two parts because we have several sections in that question. No, because first off, the agreement, there's an agreement that is part of the conversation, and which is a conversation that is, we're talking about something that would be put forward. What you're telling me is that increasing production of oil from the tar sands in the country could allow emissions to be reduced. No, what I'm saying is that what we have to do here in our country is, my question is simple, ma'am. Yes, but there are several parts where we're reducing it. Maybe an issue of communication. My questions are clear. Increasing oil production from the tar sands and setting up a pipeline, according to you, would that increase or decrease greenhouse gas emissions in the country? Well, what I'm saying, and I'll answer once again, is that increase or decrease? Yes, well, what I'm trying to do, the information I'm trying to give you is, I'll change the question if you don't want to answer it. I'm talking about carbon capture, which is part of this agreement. So you consider with the carbon capture, how many $1 billion would it take to capture those emissions out of public funds? It has to be covered by the private sector. So there's no government money for the carbon capture programs. As I already stated, we have tax credits. So how many $1 billion of public funds would be necessary to capture the emissions for a new pipeline? And is it being done? Is it being done? Is it possible to do what? Two questions. How many billions in public funds would it take to capture the additional emissions of production in order to have a 1 million barrel per day pipeline? And is it possible through your tax credits for carbon capture to capture all the additional production for that pipeline? Okay, so what I was saying in that regard, it's how many billions? I don't have a project in front of me to look at all the data, but what I'm saying is that that's part of what was in the agreement. Chair, a point of order. I have a hard time because my colleague is asking a question and I'm trying to hear the answer, but I have a hard time following it when Jan asks a question and doesn't receive the answer. So perhaps give a bit of time. Mr. St. Pierre, honorable colleagues, it would be good if you didn't speak French because we're speaking French and you don't have the interpretation. So I'll go even more slowly so that you can hear my questions. Minister, do you still commit to respecting the greenhouse gas emissions target of Canada by 2030, the current goal? Yes. So you still commit to respecting that? Yes. Currently, do you agree with Mr. Guilbeault, who says clearly that at one point you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror, you have to be honest with Canadians, we can no longer reach our 2030 goals? Do you agree with that? Well, just for a moment, I'd like to say that I already stated that these are targets that are ambitious. We have to keep on working towards it, and we are determined to keep working toward those targets. So when Mr. Guilbeault says, to be honest to Canadians, we can no longer reach the target, you do not agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for finally taking some time to meet with us today. Minister, rural Canadians have been very clear that EV mandates make little sense in their small communities where long distances are vast, harsh weather, high vehicle costs, and limited charging infrastructure make adoption far more difficult. Will you acknowledge to this committee that a rigid one-size-fits-all approach does not work for rural Canada, yes or no?
So as you know, the EV regulations we had consultations that closed last month. We're reviewing it right now.
Yes or no, Minister? Do you agree that these mandates don't make sense for rural Canadians? Yes or no?
What I was saying is that I just want to be clear. Do I believe that EVs can make sense in rural areas? We've seen in other parts of the world, absolutely. But I just want to be clear that we're in a period where we're reviewing after having completed consultations. So right now, we're still looking at how to make sure that we have the strongest policy going forward on zero-emission vehicles.
Thank you, Minister. Brian Kingston from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association told this committee that the government's pause of the 2026 EV mandate was a recognition that this regulation isn't working and that the targets are unfeasible, noting that it would require a 200% plus increase in sales in order to meet your 2026 requirement. Based on that evidence, will you commit to permanently removing the EV mandates, yes or no?
So we're in a period of review, and I will be putting out new pieces.
Do you personally support removing the mandates, you, as the Environment Minister?
I support making sure that we have a policy that is based on the consultations and review, and it will be the strongest policy. Do I believe in zero-emission vehicles as part of the future around this world? Absolutely.
But will you support removing the mandates? Yes or no?
Well, I, as Minister of Environment, will take into account everything that's come through the consultations and come up with a strong policy that makes sure that Canadians do have access to zero-emission vehicles.
So as the Minister, you don't support or not support? You're not prepared to say that?
As a minister, I'm not going to pre-reveal what the policy will be.
Okay.
When I am completing it. What I'm telling you is, do I support zero-emission vehicles as part of the future, not only just in Canada, but around the world?
I asked specifically about the mandates, though. The mandates specifically. Do you support them, yes or no?
I am in a period of review where I will be releasing shortly the full policy.
Mr., you had talked about other countries, and Mr. Kingston testified that comparing Canada to Norway is a total outlier and not a fair comparison, citing Norway's small urbanized population, short driving distances, massive subsidies, and oil fund finance incentives that Canada would never do. Given this evidence, why does your department continue to cite Norway as a model when the auto sector says that it's fundamentally incomparable to Canadian realities? Quickly, Minister. Thank you.
There are a few pieces to that. The first part is, I think that it is worthwhile to look at the fact that Norway, as of today...
But it's not comparing apples to apples.
So Norway is a northern country that does have rural parts.
But
to
it
the
doesn't have
country.
vast distances the same as we do.
So what I'm just saying is there are lessons to be learned from a northern country.
In
that
my
has-
riding, some people have to drive 1,000 kilometers to get to a specialty hospital. 1,000 kilometers,
Right.
Minister. So how,
No one-
how are the realities the same? I don't understand.
So maybe just so that I can help you on that, what I am saying is the way that the regulations, as they had been set out, were by percentage. You would assume that where you would see the pickup the first, and I think that that's borne true when you look at numbers, is that you start with more people in more urban areas and areas where
Yeah,
there's
but the
more charging
mandates are being
infrastructure
applied right
available.
across the country, though, and they're applying to rural communities as well. Even the percentages, at no point
actually-
does it make sense for them.
So the actual way that the standards were actually didn't require that it was 20% in every region of the country, for example. It was as a country total. And you would expect that uptake would begin in areas
But
where...
eventually, it's 100%. Yes? Yes or no? Eventually, it's 100%. Yes or no?
So first of all, under the review that we're doing, my time is up, but I will just say, ultimately, other countries are moving towards zero-emission vehicles. We are seeing uptake right around the world. And so Canada should be ready not only to produce those vehicles, but also to make sure that Canadians have access to those vehicles.
Thank you, Mrs. Minister. Mr. Grant, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. I have 2 young children who are going to be growing up in the next little while, and one of them is actually going to be joining the workforce in the next 3 or 4 years. And as we shift to a low carbon economy, workers and those that are about to enter the workforce want to know what will happen to benefit them. And how is our government ensuring that clean economy investments translate to good middle-class jobs right across Canada from coast to coast to coast?
Thank you. So when different organizations have looked at the statistics for the jobs that will be available in a clean economy, there are substantial jobs right across, frankly, in different types of work. I believe that there was one estimate that there would be about 400,000 jobs created. I think that was an RBC study. And so one of the bigger issues we face is actually, how do we fill all these new opportunities that are going to come into being with these new types of projects. And it goes a whole stretch of things. So, for example, when I was talking about clean tech companies in Canada, those are a bunch of exciting jobs for Canadians who want to jump into that area. There's also a lot in the area of skilled trades. So when we look at, how do we build this electrical grid for the future? It's important that we have the people who are ready to do that. Retrofitting homes so that Canadians can save on their energy costs and at the same time reduce emissions. One thing that I was really excited about in this budget is the Youth Climate Corps, because that's a real chance for young people to get the skills, paid to get those skills, and to be able to have an active role in reducing emissions and to move towards, how do we protect our communities from the impacts of climate change. So the Youth Climate Corps, I actually had a chance when I was in Montreal to meet with many young people from diverse organizations and groups doing different things on campus or in different kind of work environments. And they were really excited to talk about what are these opportunities, how can we make sure we're setting up Canadians and young Canadians to meet those new opportunities, and also how they can have a say in framing what that will be. And that's very much, the Youth Climate Corps has been something that's been pushed for quite a while. And being able to actually see that there's a project in place in this budget is a big step forward. And I would say something that we can build on as far as what are the other job opportunities and how do we set up youth in the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. My riding is the University of British Columbia, and I had heard that as well from a number of the youth there. Just in follow-up onto that, Minister, how do climate policies help attract clean investment, create skilled jobs, and strengthen our green economy in Quebec and right across Canada?
So One of the pieces that I keep seeing is that if we have clear policies, first of all, that helps. There are also in this budget we expanded them. Some of them were already there. There are a number of investment tax credits that can actually really help to be building out these opportunities. So, for example, if we're talking about clean technology and the ability to get tax credits towards clean technology, that's something that can help industry to build up towards that. The clean electricity investment tax credit, something that is promised in this budget. One piece that I think is really important in that is that it includes the public utilities when it comes to interprovincial transmission pieces that can really work to help support what we need for the future. And what I hear over and over again is that clean electricity, Canada has one of the cleanest grids in the world, that is something that attracts investment to Canada. And it's something that Canadian companies can use as a selling point when they're trying to trade with other countries, because countries are looking for products that are low carbon, and having a clean electricity grid helps support it. So I was really excited that we have a clean electricity investment tax credit, and the fact that it actually goes to expand to cover public utilities when we're talking about how do we build across the country.
Just quickly, Minister, could you explain what steps are being taken to ensure that consultations on projects reach the communities concerned and the results are published effectively within, I guess, 15 seconds?
15 seconds.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the consultations are a really important piece, and we actually continue to, when we engage in consultations, to put them out publicly and to make sure that we get that consultation in. And I'm going to have to be able to answer that in my next question, apparently.
Thank you. Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous pour 2,5 minutes.
Madame la ministre, votre collègue, ancien ministre du Patrimoine et de l'Environnement, a dit avec les Canadiens et Canadiennes, on ne peut plus atteindre nos objectifs climatiques de 2030. Est-ce que vous considérez que M. Guilbeault est malhonnête quand il dit ça?
Thank you.
My second time will be better. Alors, est-ce qu'on a de la
Un instant, s'il
traduction?
vous plaît. On va ouvrir.
So, we are going to check. Is everything all right? Is everything fine? Good. Go ahead. Yeah, Mr. Bonnet, we'll just start from the beginning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Minister, Mr. Guilbeault, Minister for Heritage, well, the ex-Minister for Heritage, sorry, said if we are honest with Canadians, we cannot reach our 2030 goals. Do you think that he was dishonest when he said this? Well, I was a parliamentary secretary for Minister Guilbeault for 6 years, but that's not my question. No, I just want to say I would never say that he was dishonest. I have a lot of respect for him, but I don't agree with him. So what you're saying, you will reach the 2030 goals. Mr. Guilbeault has said since Mr. Carney's government has been in place and you have been Minister of the Environment, we have gone back with these greenhouse gas emissions. Do you agree with him that Canada is going back with its targets? Well, two things. First of all, I think that he was Minister of the Environment, first of all, before myself. No, Madam Minister, the other thing I would say is Canada going backwards compared to its commitments? No. So we're not going back. So you don't agree with Mr. Guilbeault? No. I think that we are doing things perhaps differently. We are working with the... Okay, so fine. You said no. Good. So the parliamentary director for the budget has said that Canada is going back towards, compared to its target. No, what we've said was that we didn't include the strategy, the climate strategy competitiveness. And do we still have a lot of work to do? Well, of course we do. Yes, of course. You're saying your strategy, so you don't agree with the parliamentary budget officer. But what about other people have said that Canada is going backwards? No, what I've said,
Dans son rapport, il l'a dit. Il n'a pas
the Parliamentary Budget Officer says so, that he did not include the competitive strategy for climate. He said so himself.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
OK, mais c'est parce que vous étiez en anglais puis il n'y avait pas de traduction, donc je dois...
You were speaking English and there was no translation.
Avez-vous vu une première version de l'entente Alberta?
So when did you see a first version of the agreement with Alberta? When?
Avec
La
le
question, c'est quand?
Premier ministre et
I worked with the Prime Minister and we continue to do the work. My question is when? When did you get a first version of the Canada-Alberta agreement? Like I was saying, I was part of the conversation. Give me a date. I don't have a date. 5 days, 10 days. All I can tell you is that it was part of the conversation. So you have no dates. When you can't remember when you saw first draft. There were negotiations, conversations, negotiations for months now. Inaudible interruptions.
j'avais
So
moi,
did you see it the night before? What I said is that I was part of negotiations and conversations, and there were conversations that had been going on for quite a long time.
Mr. Bexley, the floor is yours for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for being here today. Thank you, Minister, for finally appearing. I see that you found time to be at the Finance Committee on October 20th, but took your time to get here. Minister, the recent MOU signed with Alberta suggested the immediate suspension of the clean electricity regulations. It wasn't in the Gazette this weekend. When will it come into effect?
Okay, so the clean electricity regulations are in effect now, but only begin applying in 2035. They were intentionally given as a long tail for all provinces and territories to be able to work towards them.
2035?
Yeah, if you look at the way the regulation is drafted, in 2035, that is when they begin to apply.
When will it be published?
So what I'm saying is, in the Memorandum of Understanding, the wording is that I have with the province of Alberta, or we have with the province of Alberta until April 1st to negotiate an agreement where they can show that they have a pathway to meet the objectives of the regulation.
Okay, so all of this is still under heavy negotiation?
It's right in, I can read you the exact wording of the agreement.
So we should presume no elements of this MOU will survive or could survive, or everything is up for negotiation?
What I would tell you is that with all provinces, I have the ability to negotiate a pathway to meet the objectives of a regulation. And I think it's a really amazing thing that Alberta is going to sit down and do that negotiation.
So you suggested earlier in your opening remarks that there was a climate cost of food, yet the industrial carbon tax is still applied to fertilizer production, grain drying, farm equipment, and you've made great speeches in the House to the effect that this is not a tax, has no impact on food prices. Isn't that an oxymoron? I mean, like that's ridiculous. You say there's a cost of food for all these other things, but yet you're taxing the means of production of food, and it doesn't impact the price at the grocery store. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I can even provide the studies to this committee if you want. Absolutely. There are studies time and time again, in fact, that say that the industrial carbon price does not increase the cost of food.
So then what does it impact? Is it just impact the viability of farms, and so farms get smaller?
No, it does. It's actually...
So farms consolidate to bigger farms?
Small farms aren't impacted by the industrial carbon price.
They're not impacted by it all, so the carbon taxes that I'm paying as a producer are what, imaginary?
The industrial carbon price applies to large industry. It applies in different ways in different parts of our country. I pay
carbon tax on the electricity and the equipment and the fertilizer that I use to run my farm. And you say that's imaginary?
I would love to see how you're breaking that down, but what I am telling you...
with real dollars.
You wouldn't have a line, sir, that says anywhere industrial carbon price.
Because it's hidden, yeah, but the price has gone up on
hidden.
everything.
It's not that. I'm just saying I don't see where you're seeing
Minister,
it.
to the next question, are you constitutionally impaired from saying the word oil pipeline?
That's actually a very funny question. Does it matter to you if what words I use,
appreciate
what time
the
or not?
hilarity of it. You know, you said that there was a lot of discussion about the pipeline, but pipeline is a binary thing. It's either we build a pipeline or we don't. There's no middle ground. Do you support a pipeline?
I support our provinces working together if they want to work together. No, but that is what the Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta
Ultimately,
is about.
it leads to a pipeline or no pipeline, one or the other. Do you support a pipeline?
I support that if the provinces and the Indigenous peoples are in agreement, that then there is a pathway to actually make that happen. But I am not
what
going
happen?
for a pipeline. But
Thank
what
you
I'm
very
saying,
much, Minister.
but I think it's really important. I would not override Indigenous peoples' agreement, and I would not override the province of British Columbia, which is what the Conservatives say they would do.
So the province of British Columbia has a veto.
The Prime Minister has been clear.
The Prime Minister has sole responsibility under the Constitution and C5.
You are repeating again the Conservative line that you would
This is not
override the
Conservative line.
provinces
This is
and
legislation.
Indigenous
It's
people.
law.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of interrupting. I think it would be nice to give ample time to respond to questions. Thank
Appreciate
you.
the point.
The Prime Minister has been clear, and he said it in the House of Commons, that there needs to be agreement from the province of British Columbia and of Indigenous peoples, and we're not going to override the jurisdiction of
veto.
our provinces, and we're not going to override the rights of Indigenous rights holders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fanjor, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister. The Conservative opposition and here in this committee have made it abundantly clear that they're opposed to all solutions for this ecological challenge that we're facing. They're opposed to market-based solutions, non-market-based solutions. Not only do they not have any of their own, they don't want any other solutions to come forward. Can you elaborate on how climate action supports good jobs and economic growth, and talk about some of the clean energy projects underway that are driving innovation and economic opportunity in Canada?
Thank you. It actually consistently stumps me when I hear the Conservatives saying that they oppose all climate policies, because it's not just about reducing emissions, and we must. It's not just about the moral obligation to our future generations, which is there. Like, I don't want to, I worry, because we talk about the economic piece, and it is really important that we do, but it's also really important that we don't lose sight of the fact that we have to do this because it's our obligation to all future generations, and it's essential for our country. You know, we are facing wildfires in extreme amounts. We had the second worst wildfire season on record last year, and the worst one was only 2 years before that. I want to just make sure, I don't want to feel or for people to get the impression I'm only talking about it from an economic perspective. I think we need to fight climate change, and we must all do it. However, from an economic perspective, it is also important, right? And there's so many opportunities, and why anybody would walk away from those opportunities is truly stunning to me, because we see it right now. If we look at some of the major projects, for example, that we're seeing come forward, there are projects like Iqaluit Hydro. That is Nunavut's first 100% Inuit-owned renewable energy developer. It is going to get Iqaluit off of diesel. That's good for the health of the community. It's good for the environment, and provides opportunities as that gets built out. If we're talking about one project I'm really excited about, high-speed rail. High-speed rail, right now, taking the train between Toronto and Montreal, I can tell you because I have family in Montreal and I live in Toronto now, it takes a really long time. It would cut speeds between Toronto and Quebec in I think it was 3 hours is the estimate of what that would take to get between those places. What that means is there are jobs in building it, in designing it, all of those parts. There are jobs in the steel that's going to have to get manufactured for that project, for the aluminum that's going to be needed for the construction. But it also means that it unlocks such an important economic corridor for us that people can get back and forth quickly and in a low-carbon way between cities so that they can actually commute and do work in these cities. It's an easier way to keep people connected. So the job opportunities are sometimes in the construction and in the design, but they're also in what are they unlocking for the future. And so that's another space. Also talk about a number of the mines that we are seeing that are going into development. When we're talking about net zero mines that will create mine the products that we need for batteries and for the items that we need and that the world needs to get to a net zero economy, again, there are a lot of economic opportunities right through in mining, but also in the next stages where we're building out a battery development, manufacturing here in Canada. So all of those are some really exciting opportunities. And I think that it's something that we need to keep looking towards is how do we make sure that these opportunities are being made for Canadians? And if we step away from taking climate action, if we step away from climate policy, we are actually taking away these opportunities for Canadians.
Thank you very much. How is the government helping farmers take advantage of emerging low-carbon markets and adopt sustainable fuel-efficient practices?
We have clean fuel regulations, and their job is to make sure that we reduce emissions from the fuels that we use in our country. But it also creates a huge opportunity for canola, which is an amazing side benefit, and which we hear great input from canola farmers that they're excited about those opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Mr. Ross, for 5 minutes.
Where's my clock?
I got you.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Minister, for coming to our committee meeting. And you've mentioned First Nations involvement in this new pipeline MOU that Alberta signed with Canada, but you also mentioned that you will not override Aboriginal rights and title or rights and title interests, as the Liberal colleagues have also said. So if one First Nation out of the many First Nations that will be affected by the pipeline and the tanker ban doesn't give their consent, is this project going to end?
So let's take, there is a few different pieces to this. One is that the pipeline proposal in this MOU does not actually have a route that's designed yet. There are a lot of conversations that have to happen.
Let me put it a different way then. Let me put it a different way. When the Trans Mountain Pipeline got approved, there were many First Nations that did not give their consent. Mm-hmm. But the Liberals still approved the project and even bought the project. Is that similar circumstance going to happen with this latest proposal or this latest MOU proposal?
The MOU proposal sets out that we need to see the provinces. I mean, I say we need to see the consultation with Indigenous peoples. The Prime Minister has said that we need agreement from Indigenous people.
I understand that.
And that exact process, I will say, is not part of my day-to-day work on this piece, right? So I am telling you, I think it's very important.
Minister, I've got to disagree with you there.
Yeah.
The Environmental Assessment Act specifically says that it has to deal with rights and title interests.
Yeah.
So to kind of deflect and say it's somebody else's problem, unless you're insinuating that the Major Projects Office is going to take full control of this process, what I'm asking is, if one First Nation along the pipeline route or one First Nation along the tanker ban exemption does not give their consent, will that be characterized as running roughshod over Aboriginal interests?
So what I'm repeating is that any project, like, and in specifically as set out in the MOU, would need the agreement of Indigenous peoples. And I can't engage in hypotheticals because, like I said, we have many steps forward.
But it's not hypothetical. What the Liberals did in the Trans Mountain Pipeline approved the project even though they didn't have consent from certain First Nations. So it's not hypothetical. There's already a precedent. But let me ask you this question. You've talked a lot about competitiveness, but a lot of the competitiveness and the obstacles you're placing in terms of us being an energy superpower only applies to Canadian suppliers and producers and manufacturers. Is there any legislation or policy coming down from the Liberal government that will actually put the same measures on oil coming from Saudi Arabia or United States?
So, two pieces to that I would say. First of all, when it comes to products like LNG, and for example, Asian markets like South Korea, Japan.
Oil from Saudi Arabia.
But I was just, if I can say, because you were talking about restrictions or the like, whatever you were
Oil
saying there.
from Saudi Arabia, from the United States, will they be subject to the same measures you're putting on Canadian suppliers?
What I was saying, though, because the first part is you were saying that it's Canadian pieces. What I was saying was, or trying to say, is when it comes to LNG, for example, there are actual
I'm not talking about LNG. I'm talking about oil.
Okay.
I'm talking about oil. Oil from Saudi Arabia comes to Canada, but they're not subject to the penalties that your Liberal government is placing on Canadian oil. Is there going to be measures on Saudi Arabia oil or United States oil currently coming into Canada?
Well, so first of all, as Minister of Environment, I'm not the person who's managing imports, but what I will say is that the export markets to which we're trying to, with all of our products and all of our energy products, there are actual, like, bona fide rules that are being put in place by the jurisdictions to which we're seeking to export that are asking for low methane. They're asking for it to be lower carbon.
I can agree.
If you are looking to
that
any market for any of our products,
okay, Minister, I can agree that you're not the Minister responsible for importing, but you are the Minister responsible for climate change action as the Liberal government has put forward. But it doesn't seem to apply to anybody except Canadian producers and suppliers. So it will not apply to Saudi Arabia, will not apply to the United States.
A very short answer, please.
What I would say is the world's moving towards the low-carbon economy, and Canada has to be ready to meet that moment.
Thank you. Monsieur Saint-Pierre, la parole est à vous pour 5 minutes.
Mr. Saint-Pierre, the floor is yours. Yes, thank you for being here. I will not try to rip my shirts, and I will ask my questions very nicely. So we've talked about industrial applications for carbon. Madam Minister, could you possibly comment on how Canadian businesses can innovate and adopt cleaner strategies with industrial tariffication? Well, what we are doing with industrial tariffication for carbon prices is that it gives industry reasons to look at what it is they can do, not just to reduce their GHGs, but also to look at other innovative methods. So as an example, I can say we have regulations on methane. And in Canada, we have several companies that are leaders in, world leaders, in fact, in the reduction of methane, or discover when there are leaks. So in Montreal, there is such an example. There is a company that does a lot of work to look for leaks. So that way, industries can quickly take action to stop this. And this company was at one time one of the top 100 companies of clean tech companies in the world. And this was worldwide. And it's from Montreal, this company. So when we have regulations that show that there is a need, this also helps to create a market for those very technologies. And it means that we can have in Canada companies that are innovative and that can find markets. And we are seeing this, and this is the time to continue this work. Thank you. This is a very innovative. Gigi said, yeah, we're very, very proud that Montreal has this company, such an innovative company. Now, you also talked about industrial carbon pricing, and you've shown about studies that said that it doesn't actually increase the price of food. For example, could you produce such a report for this committee, and could you possibly comment on these one of these reports? There are several aspects. I think that it was in the Agriculture Committee that the president of Costco said that very thing. He said that industrial tariffication of carbon did not. He said that climate change is what actually changes the price of food. So when we see that the price of food is actually increasing, many people in industry will say that it's actually because of climate change. But when it comes to industrial tariffication and the impact that it has on food prices, there was a report from the Climate Change Institute that showed with examples how this actually does not have an effect on the price of food. And I'm very happy to give a copy of this report to this committee because it's important to look at this. And we need to look at, we've got to make we have to look at the fact that the price of food is increasing, but it's not because of climate industrial tariffication. It's because of climate change. You're right. It's good to get information. Last week, I went from Montreal to Toronto to a conference, and I actually took the train, and it took 3 hours. So I'm so glad to hear that the time for a high-speed train could go down to 3 hours. Could you explain what the economic benefits would be for such a project, the high-speed rail? One of the most exciting projects for me when we're talking about large projects for Canada, a good example is the high-speed rail project, because it really shows how we can better connect cities and provinces such as Quebec and Ontario. It also shows how we can help people just to travel from one place to another in a comfortable and rapid manner. And like I say, taking a train between Montreal and Toronto can take upwards of 6 hours now. But of course, a high-speed rail could also reduce emissions, not to mention it would create a huge number of jobs for workers and steel. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have 5 minutes here. Madam Minister, you said that in spite of what Mr. Guilbeault said, that it would be dishonest to tell Canadians that Canada cannot reach its targets for 2030, and you say it will. So how concretely can we do this? How can we expect for you to show us something that would allow us for you to believe you? Because you're saying Mr. Guilbeault, the PBO, and first of all, I never said Mr. Guilbeault was dishonest. I want to be very clear because I have so much respect for Mr. Guilbeault. I have never used those words. I want to be very, very clear. Yes, but he says you're being dishonest when you're saying we're going to reach our targets. No, what I'm saying, and I've said so several times, these targets are ambitious. We know that. We knew that when we set them up, but we need all the provinces to do their work as well for us to be able to reach these targets. We can reach these targets. We must try to reach these targets. And I hope that everybody here around this table agrees that we must continue to do this work. How can we believe you, Madam Minister? When are you going to show us something that shows that you're right when everybody says that we're going backwards? Well, in our competitivity strategy, we have said that we are going to be reinforcing industrial tariffication. Yes, but your competitiveness strategy is going to reduce GHG emissions, but how? Do you have a document to prove this? We will be tabling a document before the end of the year on the progress for our reduction on emissions. So you're going to show us a document by the end of the year that Canada can reach these targets. Is that right? So by the end of the year, you're going to show us a document that Canada can meet its targets. It will show us where we're at. And it's my job to continue to do this. The other choice is that we don't do anything. We don't try. Yeah. So this job isn't done yet. Okay. So did you evaluate the impact of removing regulation on clean electricity when it came to the reduction of GHG emissions? How is it going to increase how much is going to increase the emissions? No, I'm not. I don't agree with this. I didn't say it was removed. So under the regulation, I can, and just like with industrial tariffication, I can make agreements with the provinces to show that we can meet our targets. Yes, but with Alberta, you're going to take it out. No. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to thank the Minister for this appearance. The officials will remain for the remainder of the meeting, and the meeting will briefly suspend. supplémentaire des dépenses.
The committee will start its budgetary look at it from 2026, and we will start again. And so instead of starting again, I've decided that we're going to start all over so that we can give all the members 6 minutes. So we're going to start again with the Conservatives, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in terms of the implementation of the budget and whatnot, I'm still kind of hazy on how we deal with Aboriginal issues within the context of the government dealing with, say, major projects in Canada. Can one of the witnesses describe to me how that's dealt with and what kind of costs are put toward that and what kind of resources?
Thank you for the question. We've got a well-defined process and approach for fulfilling our obligations, both our legal duty to consult, but also the government's commitments under the UN Declaration. As you noted earlier in your remarks with the Minister, through the Impact Assessment Act, there are many specific provisions and commitments throughout the assessment of major projects that are articulated to support fulfillment of these obligations. And through the creation of Bill C-5, through the creation of the Major Projects Office, the government has been very clear that its commitment both to our legal obligations, legal duty to consult, but also our commitments to the UNDA continue to hold. And so through our assessment process on major projects, we are committed to striving to achieve consent. And there's a well-defined approach and process through the assessment process to
Okay, thank you for bringing up Bill C-5 and the Major Projects Office, because that was my next question. It's my understanding that the Major Projects Office will not have any substance underneath it to fulfill the obligations that it's been tasked with. So I'm assuming that the Major Projects Office will rely heavily on the existing processes to deal with those legislative requirements and regulatory requirements for that matter. Am I correct, or is the Major Projects Office going to develop its own procedures and regulations and whatnot?
So I think it's a combination. So through the new legislative framework, there are specific procedures and steps that the government must take in designating a project.
So the Major Projects Office will develop its own regulations in response to fast tracking, or will it rely heavily on existing legislation regulations?
So both. Because there are new steps that are taken into consideration and a government decision to designate a project under Bill C-5.
Oh, I see.
But if something is designated
enabling.
under Bill C-5...
That's more enabling legislation, though, so I don't think they're going to rework the existing legislation or regulations.
Right. So once a project is designated under Bill C-5, if that were to happen, processes and approaches, including the Impact Assessment Act, if it were to apply in the absence of C-5, would continue to apply moving forward. So those same approaches and processes that we have in place would continue to apply.
Thank you. And the projected window is 2 years in terms of fast tracking, and it's still yet to be determined if the pipeline from Alberta to BC will be fast tracked. And that's not a definite. There are a lot of ifs and ands in that MOU. But in terms of that fast tracking, has your departments been told about fast tracking First Nations interests in relation to this pipeline in the 2-year window?
So we have adopted a service standard of 2 years, not just for projects that undergo C-5, but for all major projects. So all projects that are subject to the Impact Assessment Act, we are working towards being able to deliver assessments within a 2-year timeline, including our legal duty to consult and our commitments to Indigenous groups as part of these assessment processes.
But the 2-year timeline you're talking about, that's just a guideline, though. That's not a set time limit, right?
The legislation, our legislation has maximum timelines established in the legislative framework. But we're setting service standards within those.
For Aboriginal rights and title consultation accommodation to be concluded, there's a 2-year time limit?
Not in the legislative framework, no.
In the regulatory framework?
No. But there is a maximum timeline within the legislation. But within that legislative timeline, we are establishing service standards of 2 years that will apply for all major projects. So we are defining
but
and
I'm
engineering
talking about
process.
Aboriginal rights and title consultation accommodation. But you just said that there's a maximum time limit for Aboriginal rights and title issues within that. So is there a time limit, 2-year time limit for Aboriginal issues under the fast tracking proposal, nation building, C5? Is there a time limit for Aboriginal rights and title issues to be resolved?
The government's committed to a 2-year service standard for reviewing all major projects.
I understand that, but the specific question
consultation obligations.
Is there a time limit for Aboriginal rights and title consultation accommodation obligations?
There is a target, a service standard, yes, of 2 years.
But it's not a hard target. It can't be a hard target.
It's a service standard, right? So
I
it's not a
understand
legislative
that,
timeline.
but it's not a hard target because you can't put an arbitrary time limit on rights and title interests. You can't do that. The case law is pretty clear on that.
So we have a goal. It's a goal. It's
I understand the goal. I get that. And it's probably aspirational. I get all the political terms. But there is no hard line on addressing and resolving Aboriginal rights and title issues. Is there?
As I mentioned, we aim to carry out these consultations and deliver our process within 2 years, and we will be aiming to fulfill our obligations within that 2-year service standard. But there may be situations that we would consider deviations.
Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. The floor is yours, Mrs. Miedema, for 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for coming today. I would like to first talk about an issue that's had a huge impact on my community in Halifax and, of course, across Canada, and that's the rising rate of wildfires in our country that pose a real threat to the health and well-being of all Canadians. One of the major threats to public health, and particularly the health of our firefighters, is exposure to toxic flame retardants found in household products. So I think this might be a question for Ms. Johnson. Can you describe what federal actions are being taken by the department in partnership with Health Canada to address this issue?
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I thought I had to push the button and get used to that. Thanks very much for the question, and I actually will pass it over to my colleague Megan Nichols to speak a bit about our chemical management plan and some of the work that we're doing there.
Certainly. Our chemical management plan has been in place for many years now, and it helps to ensure that we have a solid risk management framework in place for any substance that could have deleterious effects on human health or the environment. So we have put in place tools for hundreds of substances in conjunction with Health Canada over the years to make sure that we are protecting our human health and environment from these types of chemicals. And it applies to a very wide range of things that are listed under our Canada Environmental Protection Act, which then enables us to put in place measures, sometimes regulations, but sometimes it's voluntary agreements with industry and a wide range of tools.
Okay, and those flame retardants are part of that work. Okay.
That's right. We actually just recently put in place a new state of science report on what we call the PFAS Forever chemicals. And that will enable us to put in place a phased approach to dealing with PFAS over time. We already have some measures in place to deal with the most egregious firefighting foams, but we will be able to, under the new regulations that we're bringing forward, to make sure that all firefighting foams are covered over time. And then we will then continue to extend the approach to other substances where PFAS are found.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. In 2023, Parliament passed Bill C-226, the National Strategy Respecting Environmental Racism and Environmental Justice Act. Work to address environmental racism in our country actually started with, or largely started with, detailed research and community engagement that was done by Dr. Ingrid Waldron in my province of Nova Scotia. C-226 aims to correct historical injustices by addressing the disproportionate impacts of pollution on marginalized communities, which has happened in Nova Scotia Scotia and across the country. Despite the bill passing into law, many Canadians don't understand exactly what environmental racism means. And in fact, there's a report for Nova Scotia that hasn't yet been made public that is with officials there now. Can one of you please explain the value of this law to protecting the health of Canadians and what environmental racism means?
Sure, yeah. At a really high level, environmental, or the Act is designed to help ensure that Canada avoids instances of environmental racism and works to prevent those occurring and to address instances that or occurrences that are there. You did ask for a bit of a definition of what environmental racism is. It's essentially the connection between instances of it's the intersection between sociological and other factors and instances of adverse environmental conditions.
Yeah, so an example would be, perpetually citing landfills adjacent to certain communities over other communities, right, which has happened in Nova Scotia. Can you provide this committee with an update on the status of the federal implementation of the law?
Certainly. So the government started some early engagement before, it would have been last fall, but some of that was suspended during the election period, during the RIP period. That has resumed. So engagement has been occurring since this fall, and studies are underway because one of the components of the requirements under the law was to conduct a study. So that work's been underway, and some early engagement with interested parties has begun to discuss the methodology for that work. The planning is to have some draft material to share so that we can have a more formal consultation begin on the planned approach to addressing environmental racism. That will happen in the early months of the winter, and the requirement is to table a study or to table a strategy by the spring, summer. So we're on track for doing that.
Excellent, thank you. Am I done? 30 seconds. Mr. Hubbard, Wind West provides Atlantic Canada with a great opportunity to grow our economy and renewable energy capacity. How will the recent changes made to the IAAC and the creation of the MPO help better facilitate these kinds of projects?
It's one of the big changes that we're moving forward on to be able to support development of these projects is pursuing cooperation and collaboration agreements with provincial governments across the country. And the 2-year service standard that I mentioned earlier, to be able to provide certainty and clarity and predictability on how these processes are going to operate. It will enable us to be able to focus federally on core areas within federal jurisdiction and be able to ensure that we've got rigorous, robust assessment of those key issues, including related consultations, and be able to provide predictability and certainty for those investors.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Bonnet, we have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our officials for being here. I want to come back to, for you, is it possible to assess, in the agreement between Canada and Alberta, we're talking about an increase of the capacity of transport of the pipeline, Trans Mountain, from 300 to 400,000 barrels per day. If there is no carbon capture, how many emissions, GHG emission, when we have an increase from 300 to 400,000 barrels per day? Can you give us an average here?
I don't have those numbers with me, but we'd be able to provide something to the committee.
Vous allez pouvoir fournir. Est-ce que vous pouvez aussi...
You can give this to us, yes. Can you also give us the assessment for that and the project of pipeline of 1 million barrels per day so that we can have, all of the numbers at once?
Sur la séquestration capture.
Regarding on carbon capture, which also is in the agreement, we're talking about the Pathway project or Pathways Plus, and this is for carbon capture. So this is a strong project for the government. There's, tax credits and so on. Can you tell us what will be the decrease in GHG, within this project?
But the idea being that that would be bringing down the emissions intensity associated with the oil in the oil sands. But again, there is no project at this point related to the pipeline, and we don't have the details related to the Pathways project, so we can provide estimates back to the committee.
Vous n'avez pas ou vous pouvez
You don't have it, or you can't produce this data?
As it is available.
Dans l'entente.
In the agreement, Alberta, Canada, there is this idea to remove the regulation for clean electricity in Alberta. Are you able to tell us what are the emissions linked to the electricity production today in Alberta, and what would be the impact if we remove this regulation as it is scheduled?
As the minister said when she was here, what we have right now is an agreement between Alberta and Canada to try and find a pathway to secure an agreement. And so at this stage, we have a lot of work to do.
Désolé.
I'm sorry. I'm going to rephrase. What are the emissions, the GHG emission in Alberta that are linked to the electricity production today?
Members here with me.
Okay.
But what I am saying is that we are in a process where we have a significant amount of work to do with the province of Alberta to get to an agreement.
Donc vous ne savez pas du tout.
So you don't know at all. In the department, is there someone who assessed this?
Are not binding on the province until 2035, so the effective impact of that on the province now would be zero.
Attendez, vous êtes en train de me dire que
You are in the process of telling me that if 2030 we are abandoning the regulation at that time, there would be zero impact on the GHG emissions between now and 2030 or 2035?
L'impact.
You asked the impact of the emissions that are linked to this regulation this year, and I'm telling you that for this year, there is no impact. I'm not talking for this year, I'm talking about 2030, the objectives that we are. Okay, in the action plan, there is a regulation on emissions. If Alberta does not have this obligation to reduce their emission, what will be the impact in reaching the objectives for 2030? For the future, as the minister explains, we will continue having conversations with the government of Alberta to see. Inaudible. It is impossible to know right now. Inaudible, too many people. Inaudible, too many people. So we have an agreement with Alberta. Mr. Guilbeault is saying, and I mean, he's a former Minister of Environment and the former Minister of Heritage. He's saying too much, that's the straw that broke the camel back, because among other things, this regulation is too important. This clean electricity regulation is too important. And you're telling me that with this agreement between Canada and Alberta, and there's no one in your department that has assessed the impact. I mean, Mr. Guilbeault is practically tearing his shirt because of this. So can you give this to me, this impact? I mean, what is happening? I mean, he represents 50% of GHG emission in Canada is coming from Alberta.
In the RIAS, which is the Regulatory Impact and Assessment Statement, those are transparently available for all folks, and so that will set out what the emissions impact are in Alberta when the CER comes into effect on January 1st, 2035,
okay.
Then that would have a sense of how it's going forward. So we are able.
So you don't know.
Mais aujourd'hui, vous n'êtes pas capable de nous dire.
But today you can't tell me.
Megan, you have any additional information?
I believe, and I don't have the document in front of me, mais je crois que c'est.
But I believe that it's approximately about 100 megatons. By 2050. Which date? Which year did you say? Short answer. I do not have the document, but if I remember correctly, it's approximately 100 megatons by 2020. Sorry, I mean 2050. I mean 2050. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officials, witnesses, for being here today still. Go a little bit different angle. For ECCC officials, out of the 371 grants and contributions that Environment Canada gave in 2025, are any of the recipient organizations connected to Brookfield?
Yeah.
Recipient organizations connected to Brookfield?
No, none
No?
of them.
Zero?
Zero.
Not one subsidiary
None.
of
Not
any?
one.
Nothing, okay. What was the total dollar value of projects that were funded by grants and contributions from Environment Canada?
You mean from the beginning of the fiscal
For
year?
2024, 2025?
2024, 2025? If you give me a second, I have that information.
Maybe simplified a little bit, a subset. What were, of those contributions, what were from projects abroad?
Projects abroad?
Yeah.
I have this, if you give me 30 seconds, but I think we are talking
No, I
about...
don't have 30 seconds. I
I
have a
can
very
take
limited
2
time.
minutes, 2 seconds, 2 seconds. Like, we have about like $38 million that went out last year.
38 million?
Yeah, and let me double check myself, just to make sure I'm giving you the right information. It's about 40 million.
Could you table that with the committee, please?
Yes, we can table
And that
that.
includes recipients and
Yep.
mission mandate?
Yep.
Last year at committee, my Conservative colleague from Peace River Westlock pointed to the fact that many of the grants and contributions from Environment Canada were being sent to American universities, adding up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Has the department rectified this at all or clarified the purpose? Or redirected them domestically to Canadian universities?
I cannot answer that question. We need to look at that
Can you
one by
follow
one.
up with
Yes,
a written
definitely.
response, please?
Definitely.
Is the department currently working on ways to increase the accuracy and transparency in its modeling? This changed angle a little bit. In the modeling work that's being done, there's a lot of uncertainty as to how good those models are, whether they're fit for purpose, what is Environment Canada doing to fix that?
Yeah, we're continuing to work with partners inside government, in provincial governments, in academia. There are modeling workshops that are taking place. And yes, we are continuing to work on the quality of our model estimates. We've invested.
When do you expect that completed or being able to offer an improved or useful model?
Some of those improvements are already incorporated into our models, and we are actually releasing projections at the end of December, the latest set. So
Thank you. The Commissioner's most recent audit found that the environment and climate change has still not identified which specific measures are essential to meeting the government's emission reduction targets. He raised the very same concern the year before, 2023. The meaning of this is that, well, this is a repeated deficiency, right? And there's no demonstrated improvement. Given that the department cannot say which, given that the department can't say which policies are driving results, whatever the metrics are.
there are challenges in isolating the GHG reduction impacts of individual measures just because of the nature of the, and actually no country really releases individual estimates of GHG reduction associated with individual measures in their climate plans because it's actually a very difficult modeling exercise because of the interactive impacts between the measures because of the complementarities. So it makes it hard to distill the impact of the individual. But what we can do is...
That exactly illustrates the point of hanging all of these projections and legislation on the models that are broken, right, that don't work.
Models are not broken. What we're saying is that individual measures, it's much harder to have accurate estimates
of. Yes, but you're impacting individual industries and individual Canadians.
Collective contributions of entire packages of measures, our models, and you'll find when we release our projections in the fall or at the end of the year, you'll be able to look at how they compare with other private sector models, the estimates of the PBO, Climate Institute, and so on.
And move to the Impact Assessment Agency. Is it customary to have many of your department grants and contributions given to individuals rather than organizations? And how many individuals receive grants for the Policy Dialogue Program and similar programs?
We'll have to follow up to give an exact breakdown.
Table that, please, with the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And the floor is yours, Mr. Grant, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. Actually, I just want to follow up on my colleague, Mr. Ross, his conversation with you, Mr. Hubbard, and it's good to see you as well. With respect to Indigenous title and rights, and what you said is that we don't have a prescriptive way of addressing those as targets and whatnot. Why do we have a target rather than a prescriptive drop dead day? What's the importance of that when it comes to the relationship building between First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and the government?
Thank you for the question. We've got more than 600 nations across the country, each with their own approach and processes. And so we found in developing our relationship that we really need to sit down and work constructively to develop a meaningful consultation approach and dialogue. And what works in one part of the country or with one nation doesn't necessarily work for another. And so as part of a pretty well-established and defined approach, following numerous court decisions and jurisprudence, following policy commitments that have been made, that developing a community-by-community approach to be able to adjust our approach to meet the needs and desires of communities on how they want to be engaged and how they want to be consulted within our processes is core to developing a meaningful consultation approach. So we do that nation by nation as part of our processes. While we have clear service standards and a 2-year commitment, and within those service standards, there's core parts of the process that we kind of define timelines around. It provides certainty not only for business, but also for nations that we're working with on expectations and how best they can organize themselves to participate within our processes.
Great, thank you. So it's about mutual respect and recognition of the relationship. So now I'll just move on with my questions to the panel here. And I noticed part of the supplementary estimates that were particularly interesting to myself and to the file is a $673 million commitment to funding Canada's international climate finance program. Could somebody tell us a bit more about this program and how it helps countries transition towards low carbon economies while strengthening Canada's international reputation?
Very much for the question. So, there we go. It's working. I'm obsessed with them working. So part of what we do when we are in international engagement with other jurisdictions through our work at the UNFCCC and other places is work with partner countries to find opportunities to lower emissions through international organizations and direct work with countries. It's part of a program that we have with Global Affairs Canada as well. This has been very successful, supporting the reduction of megatons around the world. I think this really speaks to the fact that the challenge of climate change is one of the global commons. Canada has a role to play, but we alone are not going to be able to solve an issue that is directly impacting us, impacting our changing climate, and imposing direct costs on us as a nation. So our work on international climate finance and climate change is really important to us being able to support others in taking action.
Thank you very much. We've heard the Minister speak about the $2.75 billion allocated to ECCC and SSC to acquire a new high-power computing solution. Yeah. Can you tell us more about what that is and how it's helping ECCC and the Meteorological Service of Canada prepare Canadians for a rapidly changing environment?
I would say the first thing my father said to me when I came to the job is, cool, you've got the weather. And so, when we look at, when people think about environment in Canada, climate change, they think about the Meteorological Service of Canada. There is just a huge amount of data that ECCC and the MSC absorb every single day. And doing that in an AI-rich environment with the computing power, we need to have that computing power in order to do that in a reliable way. It's not just what's going to everybody's cell phones, it's what's going to support our military, what's going to support our Coast Guard, and it's also connecting with the Canada Space Agency to support Earth observation data as well. So this investment is what's positioning Canada to have the best kind of data to support us, to support our sovereign interests, and to position us to be able to reliably take care of our country and to be a good partner in the world.
Sorry, thank you very much. And another part that I'd like to ask about is the $13 million increase contributions to the Energy Innovation Program. Would you be able to expand on what that program does and how it helps Canada maintain a reliable and affordable energy system while moving towards a low-carbon economy, please?
Energy, is that LCEF?
I think that would be, yeah, LCEF.
We might need to get back to you on that one if that's possible. And it's under our Low Carbon Economy Fund, but just the exact details of the program, we'd be happy to get back to you. And this is a program whereby we are able to provide funds back to provinces and territories and work in partnership with them to support their transition to a low carbon economy.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You still have about 30 seconds.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Bonnet, la parole est à vous pour 2.5.
Mr. Bonin, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be very happy to take the 30 seconds of my colleague if it's possible. I would like to come back to the budget, the last budget. We were talking about an increase of the tax credits for the carbon capture, as well as an extension. Can you tell us what is the financial impact? What is the forecast for the 2030-2035 period? What kind of increase in money? Is it 3 billion? I think we had some officials told us about 3 billion maybe. Do you have numbers for us?
J'ai pas l'impact des.
I do not have the impact of the credits on an individual basis, but I believe that the Department of Finance estimated about 70 million of the money invested would be supported by the credit or the extension of the credits. You said 70,000. I mean, I'm sorry, 70 billion. I'm sorry. Okay, yes, that makes more sense. But in terms of cost for those tax credits, I know you don't have the number, but can you tell us what is what are the possible change for carbon capture? Honestly, the Department of Finance would be better positioned. Could you please check? I mean, so this is your main measure after all. The 1 billion trees program, it was there. There was $3.2 billion in that plan. Can you tell us how much was expended to this day? How much you think it's going to cost for 1 billion tree, which is half of the 2 billion, and what's going to happen with the rest of the money? I mean, I imagine there's be some money left over, right? Unfortunately, this is the responsibility of the Department of Energy and the Natural Resources, so we can ask them. Yes, it would be very appreciated. Thank you. If we continue, there is a cut of 15% in the Environment Department, and if I'm not mistaken, you are saying that there will be activities under the program. It will be a reduction or an elimination of some activities that are not a part of the main mandate of Environment Canada. So what are the activities that are not under the main mandate? Is there some help for the mandate? I don't know. I don't understand.
The results of the comprehensive expenditure review will be in the main estimate. So we'll look forward to coming back and speaking about, excuse me, the details of that when they are tabled in the main estimates in March. The year-over-year reductions are available to you in the budget, and so I won't repeat them there, but happy to if that is helpful. We do have about a 15% reduction, and the key items in there, as you noted, are reducing and winding down.
Désolé, je pense que je n'ai plus de traduction.
Sorry, I don't have interpretation right now.
Time.
Okay, I'm sorry, but your time is, but there was no interpretation. We're past your time. I didn't have the answer because there were no interpretation. Can we please check on interpretation?
Okay. Il faudrait que je pense que quelqu'un parle en anglais.
I think somebody needs to speak in English so that I can check if there's interpretation.
OK, ça fonctionne, mais toute la...
Okay, it's working, but I didn't hear the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Return with the details of the comprehensive expenditure review when they are tabled in the main estimate, so I'll be able to do a breakdown at that point. I believe you have the numbers that were tabled, sort of the fiscal profile that was in the budget of how those will impact the department, so I'll be happy to talk about them then. I would say the 15% reduction that has us focused on core mandate, we're going to be looking at operational efficiencies and how we are able to do our work in a more effective way, but that 15% is not a target at environment and climate change. It is consistent if you look at the other departments that are sort of similar in size, medium-sized economic departments. So we are really looking at about the same size as equal departments. So, thank you.
Mr. Leslie, the floor is yours.
Just, Mr. Chair, before we start the clock, if I could just get some clarity, is this the last round of this meeting, or is there another round due to the late start?
So there's Conservative, Liberals.
Like 15 minutes in the middle, started 2 minutes late because the minister didn't show up on time. 11:02 is when we started.
15 or 2 minutes.
So this would be the last round.
This is last round? Okay. Thank you. Now I will proceed, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start with a question the minister did not answer effectively during her time here. At the International Maritime Organization, where this federal Liberal government voted in favor of what will be up to a $500 per ton carbon tax, has the department done any sort of modeling regarding this tax as to what the cost on average would be for Canadians?
By our colleagues at the Department of Transport, and so I think asking and inquiring from them would be the right way to go.
Okay. In terms of emissions reductions planning, if it were to go into place, would Canada take any credit for any emissions that were reduced from the tax?
So I don't have the answers to that. We will work collaboratively with our colleagues in another department to support them, but at this stage I don't have an answer to provide you with.
Okay. Picking up on my colleagues' questions regarding some of the policies that are being removed, I know it's 2035 for the introduction of the regulations on the clean electricity regulations. Has there been modeling done as part of the 2035 to 2050 emissions reduction plan? So I know we're doing this in segments. If both specifically Alberta were not to have that come into place in 2035, and or if there was carve-outs for other provinces and or the entire country post-2035, what impact would that have on our 2040 emissions reduction targets and or our 2050?
So for precision, you're asking about carve-outs related to the clean electricity regulations?
Yes, as per the MOU with Alberta from last week.
Okay, so to be clear, all of the data related to megatons based on what exists right now is in the RIAS that is public and transparently available. So I think that is thing one. With respect to any changes related to that, we have a lot of work to do with Alberta to determine what the path forward looks like in order to be able to determine if there would be adjustments to sort of our megaton allocation associated with that measure. The MOU does say that it is tier and other related rules that we are going to have to assess as we are doing that work with them up to April 1st. So not in any way trying to be difficult, but we do really understand that we have some work to do.
Let's get more right in front of us, things that are in place. My colleague was talking about the 2 billion trees. We have the EV mandate that's on pause. We have the removal of the consumer carbon tax. We have now, as per the document with Alberta, the MOU, the oil and gas cap will be lifted. Collectively, have we done any modeling as to this is the goal, this is the track. What do all these changes do to where we're actually planning to be?
So I would say this, there's a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that we are securing the megatons that are part of the emissions reduction plan. I would take industrial carbon pricing as an example there. There's work to do to make sure that that measure, that we've learned from the lessons of implementing it and make sure it works the way we want it to work. That is something that Alberta has agreed to. That's something, the budget committed to, a national approach to doing that, transparency around how the backstop is going to be implemented. So that's going to get securing the megatons there. Second part that I would say is the government is required to, and we will be tabling the emissions reduction plan progress report next month, or this month, we're in December. We'll be doing that here. That will talk about both where the government is in terms of its targets, but also what it takes to achieve 2030. That will provide the information I think that a number of members around this table are looking for, and that we'll be very happy to share and then come back and talk about.
Okay. You mentioned the gap, and you talked about strengthening the industrial carbon tax as a way to make that up. what other big ideas is the department working on? Like unless everybody else is wrong, and the minister tried to say she is right, we are not going to hit these targets, and we have had a weakening of a number of policies that were aimed at achieving that target. So what big ideas is the department working on to try to actually achieve those targets by either 2030 or 2040?
So I think, in looking at the climate competitiveness strategy, the big thing is really working with the private sector, working with the investments in clean technology, ensuring that it is going to take a big lift to get there and to decarbonize, but really the thing we need to focus on is how we reduce emissions on these things. And that's coming from the 300 methane companies that are supporting sectors in reducing.
Any specific policies you'd like to mention?
No, investment in clean technology, RD&D, those are all things that are actually going to get emissions down while supporting our resource sectors.
Switching tracks entirely, have there been any employees from ECCC seconded over to the MPO?
We have been talking about that. I'm not sure what the status of the agreement is, but supporting them and doing the assessments and work that they need to do.
Okay. In terms of the EV mandate, Ms. Nichols, you had stated last time you were here about the ability to have much more choice if the EV mandate in place. We've had other testimony that has made it clear there's 110 EV models already available without the mandate currently in place. Could you explain to me how a future ban on gas-powered vehicles actually will will increase choice for consumers?
Well, I'll start, Monsieur le Président. Oh, time's up. I'll start just by saying that the policy is currently under review, so we are making sure that it remains fit for purpose. But I would also just add that while there are more and more models available, they are not yet available in all segments which are of interest to consumers. So we still have a way to go in increasing the variety of models.
Thank you. Mr. Fanjoy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, witnesses. My riding straddles both urban Ottawa and rural Ottawa, so I get to see and spend a lot of time driving distances in the country. We have a lot of farmers in the riding, and I think that it's important that we note that solutions that work in built-up areas of the country may need to work differently in rural parts of the country. So I'd like you to elaborate on how some of the new estimates, how those can be applied in rural parts of the country to help our citizens there.
How do they support? So I think what's important is that how the rules are applied and how things we heard in terms of market availability, some of the expectations in terms of electric vehicles. One would expect that those first are going to be applied in urban centers and that there will be time and build out. There are a number of programs, including the electric vehicle charging stations and some of those pieces, more retail measures that were available from Natural Resources Canada that would support a gradual build-out over time. Greener Homes program, which had significant uptake in heat pumps, a number of those mechanisms as well, also supported the rollout both in urban and rural as people wanted to make choice. But it is about choice, and people need to be able to see the opportunities that are related to the transition and build that out over time. And I think that is sort of one of the big learnings of our time being engaged in climate and energy policy, is that you need to incent change. You need to see a practical pathway to change. There absolutely is a real cost that we are facing, $3 billion a year and $9 billion to the insurance agency from weather disasters and extreme risk. And so we need to find that pathway to be able to ensure that people see an opportunity to be incented to make change, but also do it in a way that works for their pocketbook for affordability and a path forward. So spending a lot of time in a rural community myself, you need to take that time to build up a sustainable path forward.
Yes, one thing I've found in the rural parts of my riding is that people are they are very practical. They've learned to be practical. They have to be practical. So if we show them a practical solution that saves money, reduces heating costs, reduces transportation costs, improves yields on the farm, then they will become converts very quickly. One of the things that that also disproportionately affects rural Canada is the impacts of climate change in Eastern Ontario, including my riding, but also other parts of the country. We had drought conditions, and that affected crops. We've had extreme weather. Wildfires tend to affect rural parts of the country more severely. Can you update us on some of the steps that are being taken to help build resilience in the face of some of these risks?
Thanks very much. So I was really interested to learn when I took this job on recently that probably the place that we get the most traffic is at the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, and it's a site that folks visit with a ton of data. I think it was something like over 500,000 users to really find out about how to adapt to climate change. And that's not to say that we don't want to continue to find ways to take action to reduce emissions, but it's really focused on what you can do and how you can manage yourself, your farms, your business to ensure that you have healthy land, air, and water as you're moving forward. So that is one really big piece of business that we at ECCC are doing to support people and communities in the work that they're, as they are looking to respond to the changing climate that we are in. The other piece, we have the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund that we launched in the city with the City of Richmond, BC, and then also a number of local leadership for climate adaptation initiatives. But I think it speaks to the fact that we are a federal government, but the solutions for these things really are quite local and for people. And so really trying to thread that needle of having information available to support people making the decisions that they need to make and empowering them. It goes even to the high-performance compute power that we were talking about earlier. We need to ensure that people have the information that they need to make the decisions to support themselves, because there are costs on both sides of the equation. And so how do we get ahead of those and help people do what there we go, my time's up, do what they want to do.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the witnesses for being here, the different departments. Thank you very much, and you are free to go. Thank you. Est-ce que je fais ça? Do I go with them here?
You can proceed straight to the...
Voting on the supplements estimates. There's only 3. So, person to Standing Order 81-5. These votes were referred to the committee on Friday, November 7th, 2025. Shall vote 1B under Department of the Environment be carried? All those in favor?
Yes.
All 3 of them, you want to pass on division? Est-ce que c'est la même chose pour vous, Monsieur Bonnet?
Is it the same for you, Mr. Bonnet? Just a moment. Give me a second, please, Chair. I said, if you allow me just a brief moment, Chair. Sorry, I asked you a question. Please answer my question. We're on the supplementary estimates. And my answer was, give me just a moment, please, Chair. That's why I asked you to repeat louder. Very well, my apologies. I said, just give me a moment, please, Chair.
That's good.
If it's acceptable to the committee.
Is it acceptable to the committee? Perfect. So that's it. And there's one more. Shall the chair report these votes to the House? Shall the chair report these votes to the House? Usually it's yes or no. Or on division, on your side? Okay. On division? Okay. Thank you. Media adjourned. Thank you very much.